A very warm welcome from your movie host Sudip Bhaduri on the big Barton film show. How are you keeping? You're tuned to Barton FM online and on digital, and this show is repeated during the week. I'm time travelling every week to take you to a golden movie year. As you know, the cinemas aren't open yet. We're not sure when they will open. But how about the cinematic organisations bringing back the drive-in movie experience? That would work. How could that happen across the country? I'd be the first in the queue. So 1969 is the year in question this week. What was the news in your life? Well, the news across the world. The Space Hopper toy was introduced to our British shores. Did you ever possess one? Rupert Murdoch bought the news of the world, the start of things to come. The great Sir Matt Busby retired as manager of Manchester United. He brought in the famous Busby Babes. The Beatles performed for the last time together on top of the Apple recording studios. Paul married Linda and John married Yoko. Some year for the Beatles. Concorde had its maiden flight. The pilot was Captain Brian Trubshaw. There was a four-way tie for the Eurovision Song Contest winner. Lulu from the UK was in the mix of it with Boom Bang a Bang. Not the greatest Eurovision song, was it? Prince Charles was invested as the Prince of Wales at Carnarvon Castle, a very moving ceremony. Neil Armstrong was the first man to set foot on the moon, and Monty Python made their TV debut, and the rest is Python history. So what was showing at our cinemas this year in 1969? There were some absolute belters. Sean Connery quit his role as 007, so the unknown Australian actor George Lazenby was plucked out of obscurity, or shall we say a Fry's Turkish Delight advert. He used to model clothes as well. He made his 007 debut, his only 007 role, in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Director was Peter Hunt. As a film alone, it was superb. If you put Connery back in it, it would have been the greatest Bond movie ever. Clint Eastwood tuned his vocal cords, as did Lee Marvin in Paint Your Wagon. And Marvin had a number one song with Wandering Star in the charts here and across the world. And Clint also starred in the cracking war adventure based on the book by Alistair MacLean, Where Eagles Dare, with Richard Burton. Dame Maggie Smith made her major film breakthrough in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, based on the book by Muriel Spark, and she met her future husband Robert Stevens on set. So what about my top three movies of 1969? Well, number three, True Grit, made by Henry Hathaway. This was remade in the 21st century with Matt Damon and Jeff Bridges, but this is the better version. Stars John Wayne, to this day one of the greatest heavyweight actors. He found his niche in westerns more than anything else, and this is exemplified by this masterful performance as one-eyed US Marshal Rooster Cogburn. He's hired by 14-year-old Matthew Ross, played by Kim Darby, to track down her father's killer. Glenn Campbell tags along as LeBeouf, who's a bounty hunter. And Cockburn is a hard drinker. He can't tolerate kids, he's a reluctant gun for hire, and he cannot stand women on the trip. It's going to be a fun ride for all. The rest, they say, ladies and gentlemen, is history. And Wayne won an Oscar for Best Actor the following year, a towering tour de force as the flawed hero. Number two, arguably the greatest American road movie ever made, Easy Rider, written and directed by Dennis Hopper, who also stars in this with Peter Fonda, and an Oscar-nominated performance by Jack Nicholson. Powerful soundtrack, a great depiction of the so-called American dream and nightmare. So two men looking for freedom, two bikers on their way to New Orleans to be in time for the Mardi Gras, and they meet fellow hippies, rednecks, junkies all along the way. They experiment as well. They encounter a drunken civil rights lawyer, brilliantly played by Nicholson, and they all meet a violent climax. This became a multi-million-dollar smash for a low-budget movie. This ultra-cool depiction of the hippie ethos still remains a firm favourite amongst many people. But my number one film of 1969 has to be Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, one of the great duos in Hollywood, Paul Newman and Robert Redford, ably supported by the gorgeous Catherine Ross. the story of the notorious hole-in-the-wall gang who masterminded some major train heists and became America's most wanted. The Pinkerton Detective Agency formed a posse or two to go hot on their trail, and they'll be captured, dead or alive. The Sundance's girlfriend, Etta Place, played by Ross, will aid and abet them, but they continue their exploits in South America, specifically Bolivia, and they encounter a not-so-pleasant Bolivian army in a famous climax. It's the charm element of Newman and Redford which won the hearts of many, as well as the critics. Great widescreen camera work, a superb score by Burt Bacharach, all adds to the elegiac, joyful atmosphere, a true Hollywood classic, and my number one film of 1969, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Butch Cassidy's director George Roy Hill would have been proud of the impact made by Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Newman needed a boost in his flagging career. He started well with Cool Hand Luke, but the 60s became stagnant until this. Redford, in the opposite scale of importance, was about to be launched in stellar fashion with films like The Candidate and Jeremiah Johnson, but it's the repartee and moments of sardonic humour which made them pin-up boys on many posters for many women across the world. Of all the great westerns in the mid to late 60s, this is by far the most entertaining and gave the clearest expression of what the USA lost with the passing of the West. Also released was Hello Dolly with Barbara Streisand. Fresh after a success in Funny Girl, along came Dolly Levi, ably supported by Walter Matthau, Michael Crawford and the great Louis Armstrong, made by the superb actor-dancer Gene Kelly. Michael Caine and his gang were doing their thing in Milan in The Italian Job. Sam Peckinpah, that over-the-top director who specialised in slow-motion action violence, struck gold with The Wild Bunch, starring William Holden. And let's not forget the epic classic Midnight Cowboy, with a young John Voight looking for fame in a big city but finds sleaze, and a brilliant street hustler called Ratso Rizzo, played superbly by Dustin Hoffman. Movie news from 1969. One movie causing a real stir was Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, with Robert Culp, Natalie Wood, Elliot Gould and Diane Cannon. All about wife and husband swapping big style. It looks like harmless, quaint fun nowadays, but at that time it rustled a few feathers. We also said goodbye to one of the most charming actress-singers of all time, Judy Garland. Her latter part of her life was struck by drug abuse and alcohol excess. We will always cherish her in Meet Me in St. Louis and The Wizard of Oz. Also passing away was Natalie Wood under suspicious circumstances off into the ocean on a boat which was supposedly owned jointly by Robert Wagner. And the mystery still remains. One of the big summer smashes for all the family was Walt Disney's The Love Bug, about a Volkswagen Beetle with a mind of its own called Herbie. Other great thespians who left us, Boris Karloff, who was born William Henry Pratt, one of the great characters in horror movies ever. Who can forget Frankenstein's monster and The Mummy? A leading swashbuckler, Robert Taylor, also passed away, as well as Thelma Ritter. Remember her? And she got an Oscar nomination for Hitchcock's Rear Window. Smart, sassy, talking, middle-aged lady who raised a smile or two for lots of people. At the Academy Awards, Best Film was Oliver. Best Director was Oliver's Carol Reed. Best Actor was Cliff Robertson for Charlie. Best Actress was the wonderful Katharine Hepburn for The Lion in Winter, all about Henry II. It was all held in the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in mid-April. How things have changed. And on a personal note, I experienced my very first caravan holiday in Somerset, more specifically Burnham-on-Sea, and sampled cider for the first time. How do I remember that? Well, that's it. It was 1969, a great year for news and movies. I'll speak to you all next week for more trips back in my movie time machine here on Barton FM.